Okay, good afternoon. Thanks everyone for coming along this morning to this red-legged earth mite research webinar. Today I'm going to show you some of the exciting research that we're doing as part of a GRDC funded project that aims to manage red-legged earth mite resistance. And this webinar will cover a particular component of that research, which is red-legged earth mite demonstration trial sites that we have running in Victoria. And if I just get up here, okay, so this is an example of one of the trial sites that we have running. It's in Echuca, and this is an aerial photograph that I took of the site myself. It's a wheat paddock, but before we get into describing these trials and telling you their purpose, I want to first give you a little bit of background to the research project itself. The project, which is titled Future Options for Control of Red-Legged Earth Mite in Australian Grain Crops, is a 4-year project that's investigating alternative control strategies for the red-legged earth mite. Project is funded by the GRDC and it's led by Cesar Australia, ourselves, in collaboration with University of Melbourne, CSIRO and DPIRD. And the project has also been extended to red meat producers through co-investment from Meat and Livestock Australia and to pasture seed producers through co-investment from AgriFutures. And this is great news because, look, as we all know, red-legged earth mite is not only damaging in grain crops, but also to pastures. So the project will continue the important resistance surveillance work that has been going on over the last decade. Which has actually been successful in mapping much of the known resistance distribution of red-legged earth mite across the southern grain growing region of Australia. And it's also going to investigate several other things, including new mode of actions and biological extracts to suppress red-legged earth mite populations. It'll also investigate the effect of predators on red-legged earth mite, such as the French anistis mite, which you can see a graphic that I've posted here. And we'll also be developing some grower tools, predictive tools to help better manage this pest. And 2 of these tools include the red-legged earth mite diapause hatch tool and the a seasonal risk forecasting tool. Some of you may have attended our webinar back in April, which ran through the hatch prediction tool and how that works. And we're currently working on a seasonal risk forecasting tool. So the quality and usefulness of the outputs that this project develops will heavily rely on input from growers and advisors across Australia who deal with red-legged earth mite each and every season. And because of that, we have developed a red-legged earth mite knowledge benchmarking survey. So we can hear from you, so we can hear from growers and agronomists, and you'll actually help us shape this project and the inputs going forward, especially with these demonstration sites and these demonstration trials. Your input will help shape these in future seasons. So if you haven't heard about this survey or haven't already taken it, I would really appreciate if you could take a moment to scan the QR code, and after the webinar you can run through the survey. It should only take about 10 minutes, the survey. And we have also developed a red-legged earth mite online training module, which you'll have early access to if you complete this survey. So I'll just give a minute or two for you to scan that.
Leo, I've added the link to the survey into the chat too, if that's easier for people.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Lizzie. Okay, so the demonstration sites that are part of this project fall under an output that is investigating integrated pest management tactics for managing red-legged earth mite. And this is, again, one of the sites that we have running in Victoria. And I think before talking about the sites, it's also important to understand why we need to investigate these alternative control tactics for this pest. And I suppose, as most of you are pretty aware, red-legged earth mite is one of the most destructive and economically important pests of winter grains and pastures in southern Australia. It's particularly damaging at the establishing phase of crops in autumn and across winter. And they have quite a broad range, host range of plants that they attack, including canola, barley, wheat, oats, clover, pastures, lucerne, vetch, and also some broadleaf weeds. This image here that you see is red-legged earth mite on capeweed, which is one of the preferred broadleaf weed hosts. And control of this pest has primarily been through the use of pesticides through contact foliar sprays and seed treatments. However, this is complicated by the fact that there's only 5 mode of action groups registered for control against red-legged earth mite by the APVMA. And these are organophosphates, fiprols, synthetic pyrethroids, neonicotinoids, and diaphenpyron. Of these, growers rely heavily on 3, which include synthetic pyrethroids, organophosphates, both as foliar sprays, and neonicotinoids as seed treatments. And an over-reliance, I suppose, on prophylactic use of these 3 groups to sort of safeguard sort of small margins in gross margins in crops has really created a high selection pressure for this pest to evolve resistance. And unfortunately, there is now quite widespread resistance to synthetic pyrethroids, and organophosphates across much of WA and South Australia. And more recently, there has been a detection of organophosphate resistance in Victoria. So it's pretty clear that if we continue down the path we're going and continue managing this pest in the same way that we are currently relying on these limited number of chemicals, that it won't be long before resistance spreads even further. So that's why it's important that we investigate alternative control tactics, and integrated pest management is an important way that we can do that. So we have 2 demonstration sites running in Victoria. This is one on the an image here on the left is one in northern Victoria at Echuca, and the one on the right is in southwestern Victoria near Beaufort. These sites will run for 3 growing seasons, and within these seasons we will assess novel red-legged earth mite management techniques with the aim of developing a suite of practical integrated pest management tactics for sustainable red-legged earth mite management. So these trials are flexible, and they're very much influenced by growers and agronomists who we've contacted and who we will continue to contact and consult with to help us try out new tactics each season to control this little pest. At the end of the webinar, I'll sort of go through and I'll ask if anyone would actually have any interest visiting these sites during the springtime, or we plan to set up a focus group of interested individuals who would like to help us shape these trials next season and the year after that. So the demonstration sites, I've described where they are, but what are we actually trialing, and how did we decide on choosing the sites that we have? So back in January and February of this year, I conducted phone interviews with many growers and agronomists to hear about their experiences controlling red-legged earth mite. I was trying to find growers who had had success in the past controlling this mite with limited chemical intervention, and I was interested in growers who were trying alternative or novel management approaches to pest management on their farm. So these could include simple integrated pest management approaches, such as minimal insecticide usage, using cultural control practices, crop rotation, stubble retention, things like that. And they've had success controlling redlegs in that way. But I was also interested in trying to find people who did something a little bit different, and this could include completely foregoing all agrochemicals on the farm, no pesticides, no insecticide, no fertilizers, no fungicides, no herbicides. So it was these novel approaches were what we were interested in trialing, and we wanted to see how they would affect red-legged earth mite population numbers. And we wanted to compare these low chemical approaches, novel approaches, to more conventional farming. So we wanted to compare it to paddocks that get calendar fertilizer applications, receive calendar pesticide applications, have herbicides applied to them every year. And we wanted to compare how these different management approaches, is what we've been calling them, would have an impact on red-legged earth mite abundance. But not only did we want to assess how they would impact red-legged earth mite numbers directly, we also wanted to assess how they would have an impact on the factors that we already know control redlegs. So things such as predatory mites and beneficials, broadleaf weeds, fungal pathogens. How would these different management approaches affect those things, which in turn can have an impact on red-legged earth mite numbers in a paddock in a given year? So through the process of the interviews, we found 2 growers who were quite interested in taking part in the trials. And as I mentioned, as you saw before, one was located near Echuca and the other was located near Beaufort. So the first paddock that I'll describe, it's the paddock that's located near Beaufort in southwestern Victoria. It's about 30 kilometers from Beaufort in a townland called Stoneleigh. And this paddock is a canola paddock. This year it's in canola, and it's approximately 140 hectares in size. And we asked the grower if he would be interested in participating, because his management approach is what you would consider classical IPM. So he uses cultural practices such as crop rotations, stubble rotation, and actually removal of stubble during years of heavy stubble loads, to manage pest populations on his farm and to promote beneficials. And he's had quite a lot of success managing pests on his farm, including redlegs, with this approach. And it's allowed him to avoid using foliar insecticide applications for the last 7 years. So 7 seasons, he hasn't used any in that time. He does, however, still use insecticide seed treatments. So the canola in this paddock is actually seed treated, and he uses herbicides and fertilizer and fungicides throughout the season as well. So this is, again, the drone image of the paddock that I took. And what we did is we split the paddock into 2 management areas, 2 plots, if you will, which were both 4 hectares in size. And we called these the novel management area and the conventional management area. And with this grower, what the novel management area was, it was essentially just how he was managing the paddock, with his IPM approach. And he would essentially manage the entire paddock, and we would take a 4-hectare section of it, within which we would assess red-legged earth mite abundance. Then the conventional management area within this paddock, the only difference between that and the novel area is that it received a foliar application of insecticide. It received an SP early in the season when red-legged earth mite eggs began hatching, and then we would assess how this would affect the red-legged earth mite numbers and those other interesting factors such as beneficials and predatory mites and fungal pathogens throughout the year. So this paddock has been, I've been out to this paddock and assessed it 3 times already throughout the growing season, and we've captured data on that. We initially had planned to, this is another photograph of the paddock. We had initially planned to put these 2 plots, these 2 management areas near a dam on the paddock, because this would, there was quite a lot of capeweed around this dam. It would be a good refuge area for red-legged earth mite populations. But unfortunately, this grower hasn't had a very good go of it this season. He had quite a lot of slug damage early on in the season to that area near the dam, this northern half of the paddock. And he also, as with many, I suppose, growers in that region of Victoria, suffered with a lot of heavy rain, and the paddock became quite waterlogged, and as a result, there was quite patchy canola establishment. So we had to move the plots, the management areas down into a drier area of the paddock. So the second site that we have up and running is in Northern Country, Victoria. It's located about 40 kilometers southwest of Echuca in a townland called Tennyson. And this is a paddock that's in wheat this season. It's about 140 hectares in size. And we've done a similar thing with this paddock that we did with the other one. We split it into a novel management area and a conventional management area, both actually 12 hectares in size. But this grower is I suppose he manages his farm, his crops in a much more novel way. He actually forgoes all pesticide, both foliar and seed treatments, doesn't use any whatsoever, doesn't use any fungicides, is extremely minimal with his chemical fertilizer and with his herbicide. He hasn't used any herbicide on this particular paddock this year, and he's only gone out with a very small amount of phosphorus fertilizer so far. So he's really minimal on his chemical inputs and prefers to use biological foliar mixes that he makes up himself. These include sort of calcium and magnesium sprays to try and, his philosophy is that they try to improve soil nutrition so the soil can mineralize the different nutrients that are already in the soil and give that to the plant. So, sorry, I'll just go back there. Yeah, we've also been out, I've also been out 3 times to this paddock as well, assessing it throughout the season, gathering data on mite abundance and predatory mite abundance and things such as weeds and entomopathogens, fungal pathogens, as I mentioned previously. And this grower as well, yeah, he's more or less eliminated insecticides from his system over the past, so for the past 10 seasons, hasn't used any foliar or seed treatments, which is, I suppose, quite something when you think about it. So then the management areas themselves, what are we actually measuring each time we go out and visit the sites? So as I mentioned, the plan for this season is to visit these sites 4 times throughout the year. I've already been out 3 times to each paddock so far, and we're measuring red-legged earth mite abundance, predatory mite abundance, things such as snout mites or velvet mites, predatory mites that are known to control red-legged earth mites. We're measuring beneficials, spiders, ants, any beneficials that are that actually control redlegs. And then we're measuring entomopathogens. We haven't actually come across any of these so far this season, but they're essentially fungal pathogens. I've a little image down here in the corner of a fungal pathogen of an aphid, not a redleg. I didn't have any images of that. And then we're also measuring broadleaf weed density, because these are known to support red-legged earth mites as an alternative host. And then we're also measuring Brix percentage, which is the measure of dissolved sugars within the leaves of a crop, and we're assessing if this has any impact on redleg numbers. So that's what we're measuring, and at each site, so this is the site at Echuca, these are the 2 management areas. The one in red, I should actually mention that the management area at Echuca has also received a foliar application of insecticide, an SP as well, while the yellow area, which is the novel management area, hasn't received any. And this is essentially the sample pattern. So within each area, I measure 15 individual observation points using a blower vac and a 0.5 meter squared frame. I vacuum sample the area and assess what's within that area. So I measure each of these, getting a good even spread across the area. And we went with this approach as it gives a good spread across the whole 12 hectares. And it also tries to minimize the incidence of edge effects, which might, you might expect there to be more red legs down here towards the refuges and the dam. So as we get across the paddock, that sort of minimizes those edge effects if we assess the whole area. And yeah, so the beneficials and predatory mites. So far, it's been quite interesting what we've been finding. Beneficials and predatory mites have been very prominent in both systems, and they certainly seem to be keeping red-legged earth mite numbers in check. At the northern Victoria site at Echuca, it's quite interesting because the red-legged earth mite numbers in the novel management area, which haven't received, that area hasn't received any insecticide, any foliar insecticide. While at the start of the season, when eggs just began to hatch, numbers were, quite high. And with each successive sampling time that I've gone out, the red leg numbers have actually declined, and the beneficials and predatory mites seem to have stayed constant, if not increased. So they seem to be having some sort of effect on the numbers there. While in comparison, in the area that has been sprayed, while there are, understandably so, there's no red legs there, there's also no beneficials at all. And now, since I've been out on my most recent score day, there's actually quite an issue with lucerne flea, which have sort of resurged and come into this management area, while they're not present in the area that hasn't been sprayed. And then similarly in southwestern Victoria, at that site near Stoneleigh, a similar thing is being observed. The area that's received the foliar insecticide has quite low, it doesn't have any red legs because they've all been killed, but there's also no beneficials present. There's no spiders, no ants, no other beneficials there. While in the area that hasn't been sprayed, we're still seeing those beneficials providing some level of control to the mites. And only recently, we don't have enough data just yet on the bricks at both sites, because we've only recently began recording that, because early on the season, when things are only just established, there's just not enough herbage there to measure the bricks from the plant leaves that are available. So that's more or less an overview of what we're doing with these demonstration sites. So look, I'll welcome any questions that you might have, and I'd also just like to ask, you can pop it in the chat, or you can send an email to us later on if you'd rather not. If you'd rather have a think about it first, but if anyone will be interested in visiting the demonstration sites later in the springtime, please let us know, and that might be something that we'd be able to organize. And if you are interested in visiting those sites, what exactly would you like to see there on the day? And then secondly, as I mentioned, next season and the following season, we have the opportunity to trial different things in these paddocks. We have the opportunity to maybe trial some more things, do some more replication, have some more rigorous trials. And we'd really like to hear from you, whether you'd like to help influence that and help design the what we'll trial in the coming seasons. So if you'd like to be involved in a group like that, please also get in touch with us. We'd be really keen to hear from you. So yeah, I'll open it to the floor there now. And if you have any questions, I just see Phil, you've put in the chat, early sowing longer season varieties has been game changer in many New South Wales areas, avoids the hatching period for red-legged earth mite, blue oat mite, and crops are advanced, not susceptible by the time red-legged earth mite hatches. Yeah, that's definitely that's a known sort of way as well to help control red legs, and it's definitely what I even noticed with the paddock that we have at Echuca. The conventional management area received fertilizer at sowing. And that really, while the rest of the paddock didn't, and that really allowed it to sort of get ahead and get that boost. And as such, it's much further along in its growth stage, and we noticed maybe slightly less pressure from that as a result. Anyone else have any questions or would like to know anything more about what we're investigating?
Could I just ask something? John Seidel is
Yes.
my name. I used to work for Bayer for donkey's years, and I'm retired now.
Yes, John. Yeah.
I was pretty much involved with James Ritchell Smith and in the time right thing.
Yes.
You're combining any time right type activities with in your work?
That's something that, because obviously it's coming to right time soon, we have the opportunity, yes, for probably more so at the paddock with at Echuca, because it has a higher density of redlegs there at the minute compared to the one the canola paddock. So we are thinking about, you know, potentially spraying a particular area of it, a particular area with time right, and then next season investigating how that compares to areas that didn't get sprayed out.
Can I just do an extension of that is,
Yeah.
having been involved with chemicals all the time, there's Phosmet or Imidan is one of the products that leaves a lot of predators behind. It's probably the more favourable one.
Okay, yeah.
Phil Michael from Western Australia did a lot of work on that.
Yeah.
You know, if you were looking at it, that might just complement and help, rather than using an SP where
Yes.
you're not going to control the lucent flea. So you can upset the balance. Although a lot of farmers do use SPs, but a lot of them also use the broad spectrum ones, which control lucent flea and earth mite and blue ape mite and other things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the predators.
Yeah, exactly. And because both of these paddocks do have quite a good baseline of beneficials already, because, you know, the growers have been able to eliminate, you know, to a large extent insecticides. We're trying to sort of promote that as best we can and really facilitate those beneficials to continue throughout the seasons. And yeah, it's interesting because both of the paddocks did receive SP foliar insecticides, and that's probably why the lucerne flea have sort of increased in numbers now in the Echuca paddock, because they might have a bit more tolerance to SPs. Just out of interest to anyone as well, we are also going to be running in the next few weeks as well, as part of this project, insecticide spray trials on red-legged earth mite on a pasture paddock. So this pasture paddock has a known population with organophosphate resistance, and we're going to be assessing essentially what growers can do in the face of organophosphate resistant red-legged earth mite. So we're going to just do a bit of a spray trial, a randomized block spray trial over the next month, and we'll get some good data on that.
Tell me, can you are you continuing these trials into the next year using the same site?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we'll be continuing these trials for the next 2 seasons after this one. And yeah, that's why we're interested in hearing from individuals, growers, agronomists, anyone who would like to have their say about something that they would like to see trialed, and it's something that we can definitely look at in the seasons going forward.
Can I don't want to dominate things, but just one last question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whether the OP resistance is a stable thing. I mean, I was involved with the first resistance picked up was in Yay, we thought. Ari Hoffman and Paul Yamine, I think, were involved in that.
Yeah.
But the next year we went back and we sprayed and we got very good control. And at that stage, we thought it wasn't quite stable, the resistance for the OPs. We're using a methawate at that stage.
Yeah. Well, this we've done quite a few lab bioassays on this population already. So even though it does have organophosphate resistance, it's sort of that resistance and the mechanism that controls that resistance, you will still achieve some level of control. It's not like the SP, which is just completely doesn't work. And through the bioassays, we've seen that chlorpyrifos is they seem to be a bit more resistant to chlorpyrifos compared to omethawate, because those OPs have, you know, different chemical structures. So that's going to be interesting when we're going to use chlorpyrifos as one of the sprays, omethawate, and then also potentially a mix to see what effect that has as well.
Don't forget Phosmet.
Yes, definitely.
You know, it was a very interesting compound. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. Okay, if no one else has, John O'Fenwick, we've been letting red-legged earth mite go when possible, but in many cases ended up getting overrun with lucerne flea, Northern Victoria. Yeah, that's, and even John up there at that site, it's Grant Sim's site. I've noticed quite a lot more lucerne flea now, especially after we've sprayed. So hopefully it doesn't become an issue at this stage in the season. So yeah, look, if anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. Otherwise, if you'd like to
more, I might
go ahead, John.
one more. I sprayed a few pyrethroids, and the snout mites seem to be a lot more tolerant.
Yes,
They seem to still persist by the look of it, even under pyrethroid regime. I mean, it might take a couple of sprays to knock them all off, but certainly one spray was left a lot of snout mites behind.
And that's something that I've been noticing as well, because we have sprayed some of these. Now it definitely has reduced snout mite numbers in the spray areas, but still finding snout mites even when things like the blue up mite and the red-legged earth mite have been killed off, still finding snout mites in certain numbers. So it's an interesting thing that we have found, and something that we are potentially going to look into further. I'm not sure how much. I'm sure there has been some work done on it previously, but it's something that we'd like to maybe investigate a little bit more. And yeah, I'd just like to remind everyone again, please, if you haven't taken our red-legged earth mite benchmarking survey, I'd highly encourage you to do so. And please share it around as well if you get the opportunity. If there's any agronomists who might be working out of an office and have other colleagues who would be able to take the survey, it would be really great, because the more input and the more feedback we get from that survey will really help us not only with these trials going forward, but to update management advice and resistant management strategies as well. Okay, then if no one has any other questions, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for everyone who came along today. Hopefully you found something interesting and something worthwhile. It's certainly exciting research, and I know that a lot of us here in Cesar are very excited to see what will happen over the course of the 3 seasons that we have with these trials.
Thank you, most interesting.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks.